Hey book nerds, welcome to my channel. So today I'm doing my mid-month wrap-up for June. So far this month I've read 10 books. It is the 15th as I'm filming this, which is fantastic. I'm back on my reading mojo. That's a weird word to use, but yeah. I've also taken part in 3 readathons, technically 4, and I'm just taking part in a 5th one now. These are all kind of spontaneous readathons and I used a lot of the same books for them. But yes, it was the Queer Lit readathon, the Read Your Gaze readathon, the Feel Goodathon, the Panamathon, and then I've just started taking part in Galliathon, which is the NetGalley one. So I'm kind of gonna... I'll link the Twitters for all the readathons down below, but I'm basically just gonna name check when I mention each book what I used it for, which challenges, and that kind of thing. So yeah, let's start going through the books. So the first book I read was a 4-star book and it was Out Now, edited by Sandra Mitchell. And this is an arc I got given. I've got a full blog review of it, so I'll link it down below. It's a collection of short stories set in the modern day about queer people and queer relationships and all kinds of things. Some of them are contemporary, some of them are more fantasy based. I really enjoyed this collection. I've not actually read all Out yet, but I understand that one's historical and this is the more modern day one with some speculative fiction thrown in. There are obviously some stories that didn't gel with me, particularly the speculative ones. They tended to be genres that I don't usually read, like science fiction, and so I naturally rated them lower. Some of these short stories I really loved. The second one in particular, the name escapes me, but like I said, it'll be in the blog review down below. That one was amazing. It was so good, and it was just really nice to start off the month reading some really cute queer stories. Like, I love this collection. I really recommend it. So I used this for quite a few challenges in the Queer Lit Readathon. I used it for the Queer Friends challenge, Summer Vibes, Queer Sports, and the BiPan MC. So the Queer Lit Readathon, just to clarify, ran from the 31st of March until the 6th of June. The next book I read was a non-fiction book, and that was Gender Explorers by Juno Roche. This I gave 5 stars to. This is, like I said, non-fiction, and it's basically a group of interviews with trans children and their parents. And this book really opened my eyes. Again, I'll have a full review down below because it's an arc I was given. But this, I didn't realise how young the children in this would be. Some of them are as young as 5, and when I first started reading this book, I was like, that makes me uncomfortable to read about a 5-year-old who's identifying as trans. And then the more I read it and the more I thought about it, I realised that that was not a reasonable, well, I won't say it wasn't a reasonable feeling, but it didn't make sense for me to feel that way because I have a lot of close trans friends and every single one of them has pretty much always known they were trans, even from a very young age. Even if they didn't have the language for it, they had feelings or they knew that something wasn't right. And so it doesn't make any sense that a 5-year-old wouldn't be able to identify as trans. And this book was just so eye-opening on that level. It was really, even, I don't want to say even me, but like I said, I've got loads of trans friends and I'm still learning stuff about trans people, and this book really helped me with that. The other really great aspect was the interviews with the parents, and these are the ones that really resonated with me as someone who isn't trans, because these were beautiful stories. You never ever hear about parents who kind of accept their kids as being trans. Like, obviously they exist, but in fiction it's a very rare narrative for that to be the case. And this is non-fiction, and it was just so refreshing to read about so many parents talking about their kids in such a lovely way and being so open-minded and talking about how they did their own research. And yeah, there's some quotes in particular. They're in my blog review. I would recommend you look at them because they're the ones that like really resonated with me. And by the end of this book I just felt lovely. I won't say it's all lovely, there is some trigger warnings. One person does talk about their suicidal thoughts, and depression and that kind of thing. But in general, this is a really positive, inspiring book, and I'm so glad I read it because, like I said, it really has left a huge impact on me, and I definitely recommend reading it. It's fantastic. So again, I used this book for some of the challenges in Queer Lit Readathon. It was the female over 40, because I can't remember if that was the author or if it's the kind of people in the book, but either way this book covers both of those bases. There was also a non-fiction, it fulfilled that prompt as well. Next we have a graphic novel, and that is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This is the first volume I read. Yeah, I loved it. I'm gonna say right away it was a 5-star read, surprisingly. This is the cutest, it's such a good story, it's so lovely, and it's such a cute romance between these two characters, and it's just basically a contemporary story about two boys who meet. One of them, they make up a friendship, one of them is out as gay, one of them has always thought of himself as straight, but he's kind of starting to question that, and it's just lovely. It is fantastic. I can't really say much more about it. You can read it all online for free if you want to. I bought this in on the Kindle. Well, I read it on my iPad because it's a graphic novel, but I bought the virtual version of this. But you can read it all online for free, and I recommend you read it in some format because I loved it. So this was for Queer Lit Readathon. It fulfilled the challenge of a graphic novel and 5-star prediction, which was correct. And then I also used it for parts of the Feel Goodathon. So the Feel Goodathon ran from the 1st of March to the 14th of... 1st of June, we're not in March, we're in June, until the 14th of June. And it was read a book I have high hopes for, which read a short book, finish or continue a series. I started a new series because it's the Heartstopper series. So I didn't do that prompt. I wrote it down and I didn't even read what I wrote. Never mind. But those were the challenges it was fulfilling. The next book I read was Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This is Shaun McGuire. This is the same person, by the way, in case you don't know. It was a pen name. This is a horror book, and I gave it 4 stars out of 5. This is about a group of explorers who go on this funded mission to investigate this area of the ocean where there's believed to be mermaids. There was a previous investigation and everyone on the crew vanished, and there was some basically footage of mermaids, but everyone believed that it was faked, so this is kind of the company trying to save face, and they send a bunch of people down there. There's a whole host of characters. So out of the kind of main characters, there's 2 deaf women, queer woman who's implied to be autistic. I don't think it's stated that she is autistic, but it is implied. And then there's also the main character who I think was bisexual, if I remember correctly. So there's a female-female romance in this, and lots of good stuff. The deaf characters play a huge part, and particularly their deafness plays a huge part, which is really cool. It's a very positive portrayal, in my opinion, as a non-deaf person. This book was good. I said I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed the writing and it had a lot of good stuff going on. My problem was the length. This book is almost 500 pages, and I do have an objection to long books in general, but it doesn't mean I dislike all the long books I read. The reason I wasn't a fan in this case is because it is a horror, and I feel that the length did disturb some of the tension. The climax goes on for a long time. I think like 150 to 200 pages is sort of what the climax would be, and it's just impossible for any author, I think, to keep up the tension for that long. And people are bound to disagree with me because I know this is a lot of people's favourite books, and I do think it is really good. There's a lot of great stuff, and it is a very good story, but I just felt that if it had been shorter I would have enjoyed it more, and that's personal taste really. But I felt like the pacing was just slightly off, and you just spent slightly too long on each thing. But yeah, that was really my only quibble with it. The rest is fantastic. I love all of the story elements. I couldn't really predict what was going to happen, which was great. It's got a lot of all the stuff from horror that I love. I definitely recommend giving it a shot. It's certainly worth trying. So this, for the Queer Lit Readathon, this fulfilled the non-coming out challenge and also the disabled MC challenge and backlist book. Those were the 3 that I used it for. Next we have another 5-star read, and this is a poetry book. It is When No One Is Watching by Lenathi Makanda. I hope that's how you pronounce it. I was actually sent a message on Twitter by Odyssey Books asking me if I would consider reviewing this book, and it sounded up my street. I read poetry very rarely, but kind of I feel really basic saying it, but like Milk and Honey I love that book so much. Really touches me. And this sounded similar, so I was like, I'll give it a shot, and honestly it was fantastic. This book is beautiful. I will list my full review will be down below. I'm a lot more eloquent in that because I wrote it immediately after reading it, but a lot of the poems in this book are as short as a line or 2, and they just had so much meaning in that short amount of time. It's split up into 4 parts, and it kind of does the whole takes you emotionally down and then brings you emotionally back up thing, which I loved. Of my favourite poems are the ones that are melancholy, so I liked the middle sections the best because those are kind of the more despairing sections. There's strong themes of feminism in this and kind of being in ownership of your body, and I don't think there's any direct reference to sexual assault, but it kind of skirts near that area, so maybe be a bit careful if you get triggered by that kind of thing. But this collection was beautiful, and I'm really glad I got the chance to read it because it really touched me, and I think it's the kind of thing that I would read again and again because it's so beautiful. I read it all in one sitting, and it's the kind of thing where you can absorb it instantly, but then the more I think about it, the more I want to reread it, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I really loved this book. The next book was another 5-star read, but this was a reread, and it is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. I read this book of January last year. It was my favourite book, I believe, of the whole year. I didn't really rank them that way, but it was definitely up there. And it still remains a 5-star. I loved this book. This is I guess you call it a young adult thriller, but it's very different in tone from typical young adult thrillers. And this is about a boy called Oliver, and he attended a school for acting, specifically Shakespearean acting. They only do Shakespeare, and it's about him and his group of friends. He has just come out of prison, and he's been accused of murdering one of them. And he's come out of prison, and the policeman who put him away all those years ago says, I know you didn't do it, tell me what really happened all those years ago, because I'm retiring now, I'm not going to turn you in, I just want to know the truth. And he agrees to tell the story, so it's almost all entirely flashback to what happened, and this book is just so beautifully written. Normally I don't like particularly poetic writing, but it works so well because of the whole Shakespearean thing. You can really believe that this is how these characters would think and feel. You can tell they've been raised, or they've been stuck in this bubble of this school for so long that they just don't know any differently. And all the character dynamics are fantastic, and it's such a good book. I really love it. Please go buy it, because I realised I found the author on Tumblr, and apparently she's really struggling because she can't publish her next book because this one didn't sell well enough, which breaks my heart because I love it. So yeah, if you want to try this book, please go buy it because I would love to have more books from her, and it makes me really sad that there isn't. But yeah, I love this. This is so good. So If We Were Villains fulfilled some challenges from the Feel Good-a-thon. So it was a host pick, it was a reread, and it was also a fave trope really, because it's got some stuff in there. I won't say anything because it's kind of spoilers, but it's got some stuff I really like in that. The next book I read was A Cosmology of Monsters by Shaun Hamill. This is such a strange book. So this was a 3-star read for me, I think. 3.5 star? No, 3-star read. This is sold as a horror book. It's not really a horror book at all. Like, it has, so it's about a family, and the father has always been obsessed with Lovecraft. It starts with the mother and the father meeting each other and falling in love, and then, this isn't a spoiler, the father dies, and then it is about he built a haunted house, and then it's a couple of years later, and then his family build another haunted house to kind of honour his memory, and it's mostly about the family dynamics. The youngest son is technically the main character, and he encounters an actual monster, but it's not a horror thing, even though it sounds like it is from the blurb. It's not a horror type thing. It's unsettling, but it's not horror. I think that's all I can say. I'm going to say a little bit more actually. This might be veering into light spoiler territory, but I'm not going to spoil anything that actually happens beyond, like, this is still the first kind of quarter of the book. But essentially the boy starts a romance with this monster, which I wasn't expecting, which was interesting to read about. This book had some really good ideas going on. Firstly, I really liked the writing. The writing was good in terms of the actual style of the writing, and that really gelled with me. The writing was less good in terms of the plot. Like, I think you can tell from the way I'm struggling to describe this book. It has a lot of plots. It kind of it focuses on each different family member, but the problem is it doesn't complete their story before it moves on, and it never really goes back to complete their story. So like I said, it starts with the parents and you learn about them, and then it moves on to his oldest sister, and then she goes missing, and then it moves on to his second oldest sister, and then it goes to him, but like nothing is ever revisited particularly well, and you kind of just got into one storyline and then it would swap to another storyline. I think there's definitely some people who would really love this book. It's got very strong themes, and if you like kind of thematic explorations of family and how characters interact with each other, you will really like this book. The main thing for me is that it wasn't the horror that I was expecting, and it was just a little bit too unsatisfactory in its plotting for me. But it's not a bad book by any means. It was still a good 3-star read. So A Cosmology of Monsters, for the Feel Good-a-thon, it fulfilled the cover pick because this cover is gorgeous. I love this cover. And it also fulfilled a book, a new author, and I picked it for a book that younger me would have loved, not realising there's a lot of sex in it, like a lot of sex in it. Not a lot of sex, but there is sex in it, so I was like, okay, I was meant to fulfill that prompt, but it did not. And I think this is the final book I'm going to talk about for this video. Maybe one more, we'll see. This was a 3-star read, and it was The Apocalypse of Elena Mendoza by Shaun Hutchinson. This book was really disappointing to me. I've read At the Edge of the Universe by the same author, and I really, really loved that book. I was surprised by how strongly I loved that book. This book was not my cup of tea. So this is about Elena, and she is the product of a virgin birth. So it's a scientific term for it. It's not like a religious reason, but it is like a scientific reason that is given in the book. Essentially, her mum cloned herself and within her own body and gave birth to her. And she is working in Starbucks one day, and all her life she has heard inanimate objects talking to her. And the girl she has a crush on comes into the shop and leaves, and then she gets told by the Starbucks cup to go after her girl. She goes after her, and this guy comes out of nowhere and shoots Freddie, who's the girl that Elena's got a crush on. And then Elena heals her, and he just vanishes in like a ray of light. That's kind of the setup for this book. That's literally just like the first chapter. This book, the problem with this, I just didn't get into it. I could not get into it at all. I did not really resonate with any of the characters. I didn't dislike the characters, but there was just something missing, and I don't know what it was. Freddie in particular was not she never grew on me. I never liked her really at all, whereas the other ones I was just kind of lukewarm to. And I just couldn't get into the plot either. A lot of this book feels repetitive, so Elena's constantly bringing up the fact that Freddie got shot, which is fair enough. Like, realistically, that's what would happen. It just doesn't make for a very interesting story. And yeah, I just didn't want to read this. I probably should have DNF'd it, but I didn't. I read all of it, and it kind of put me off. Like, I didn't want to pick it up. I wasn't excited about it, which is a real shame. Again, personal taste. I think some people will really like this book, for it really was not for me, sadly. I'm actually going to stop it there, and I will talk about the rest of the books in the end of the month wrap up. Yeah, so those are some of the books I've read so far this month. There's a lot of 5 stars, which is great. I just kind of ended on a bit of a sour note, which is a shame. Also read a few arcs, which is also good. Let me know if you've read any of these, what you think of them, or if you want to discuss anything that I've talked about, I'm happy to do that. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. It helps me out massively, and I hope to see you next time.